Unbelievable rescue, life-saving mission for a sperm whale swarmed by nightmarish parasites. The ocean was alive with chaos, a churning mass of dread. People gathered on the cliffs, breath held, eyes wide with disbelief. Below, a massive sperm whale struggled against the waves, twisting its colossal body with despair. It wasn't just the sheer size of the creature that tugged at their hearts, it was the sight that sent shivers down their spines. Swaths of writhing parasites clung to its slick skin, a grotesque dance of nature gone wrong. The gigantic beast let out a haunting cry, echoing through the air, a sound that sliced through the crowd like a knife. Nobody knew what to do. Their hearts raced, fear gripped them. Here was a life in peril, a majestic creature battling a nightmare. Some claimed the parasites were a curse, nature's way of retaliating against humanity's carelessness. Others whispered of dark omens, tales passed down from generations. Many stared in horror, their palms sweating, as the whale thrashed helplessly. Waves crashed violently against the rocks, spraying salt and uncertainty. The stench of raw seawater mixed with the pungent odor of decay from the parasites. It was sickening and surreal. How did this monstrous creature find itself in such a plight? What terrible fate awaited it? The crowd murmured, eyes flicking between the whale and one another, their own helplessness mirroring the creature's struggle. Then, suddenly, a small boat appeared in the distance, cutting through the angry water like a knife through butter. Could these brave souls truly save it? Hope stirred, but fear remained. What if they failed? As the figures on board leaned over the edge, their expressions filled with determination but also terror, anticipation crackled in the air. The atmosphere thickened with energy, like a thunderstorm about to unleash its fury. The tension escalated, everyone could feel it. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Back on the cliffs, a young woman, trembling with anxiety, stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the boat. Would they reach the whale in time? Would they even be able to breach the thick layer of parasites clinging to its body? The wind howled, drowning out her thoughts but not her fears. Would they watch this incredible creature drown before their very eyes? There were gasps as the boat drew closer, but the parasites seemed to sense the approaching danger. They surged, writhing even more violently, attacking the whale. It was as if they were possessed. The young woman clutched her heart, a lump forming in her throat. The whale thrashed, panic evident in its enormous eyes. Was an unlikely bond of life and death about to play out right before them? The fate of a majestic creature hung by a thread, and every breath felt heavy, like it could shatter this fragile moment. Would the rescuers dive into the abyss of uncertainty, facing threats not just from the water but from the very creatures they sought to save? Only time would reveal the final act in this living tragedy that danced upon the waves. The small boat bobbed against the turbulent ocean like a fragile leaf in a storm. The four rescuers leaned over the side, eyes locked on the sad scene unfolding beneath them. A sense of urgency ignited in their hearts. They were mere humans against nature's wrath, but hope flickered like a candle in a tempest. "Hold on, buddy," one of the men shouted, his voice cracking through the roar of the sea. The whale let out another wrenching cry, a sound so filled with despair it made the hairs on the back of the young woman's neck stand on end. Despite the chaos, she felt an inexplicable bond forming between her and that enormous creature. As the boat inched closer, the water churned with a deadly rhythm, and the parasite-covered surface of the whale thrashed ominously. The beast's great eyes darted toward the rescuers, a mix of trust and terror. It was as if it sensed their intention, but could they truly help? Panic rose in the woman's chest, threatening to suffocate her. "Get the harpoon. We have to anchor it down, or we'll lose it," another rescuer barked, snapping her back to reality. The heavy harpoon glinted in his hands, a terrifying tool that could mean the difference between their safety and danger. Would using it be an act of salvation or destruction? The thought twisted her stomach in knots. A wave crashed violently, splashing icy water over the edge of the boat, drenching the would-be saviors. The weight of their decision pressed down on them like an avalanche. The parasites, now sensing the closeness of their enemies, began to undulate more aggressively, their sheer numbers almost overwhelming the whale. They were grotesque creatures, leaking a viscous fluid that left trails of infection across the whale's skin. From above, the crowd gasped as the harpoon was positioned. Every spectator felt their breath hitch in their throats, hearts pounding. Would they witness a rescue or a tragedy unfolding right before their eyes? Now! Throw it! The man with the harpoon yelled, adrenaline coursing through his veins. With a shaky hand, he prepared to let it loose. The young woman leaned forward, unable to look away. Suddenly, a deafening roar erupted from the whale, sending shockwaves through the air. It lifted its massive head, and for a split second, time stood still. It was as if the entire ocean paused to listen to its cry, echoing the loss of countless battles lost against a cruel world. The sight sparked something within the crowd. Muffled whispers turned to loud chants of encouragement. "You can do it! Save it!" But then, just as hope swelled, a dark shadow passed across the water. The mood shifted from anticipation to terror in a heartbeat. Rumors about the creatures lurking beneath the surface surged through the crowd. There was talk of ancient legends, cryptic warnings about the depths, a guardian to the ocean, angry at humanity's interference. "Something's coming!" someone shouted, pointing toward the horizon. The rescuers exchanged glances, realizing, too late, that they might have awoken something far worse than the parasites. A rush of cold fear shot through them. A massive fin sliced through the waves, ominous and sleek. What had they invited into this already chaotic scene? The young woman's heart raced as reality crashed in. Would they fight not just for the whale, but for their own lives? Would this moment they thought would bring hope spiral into a dark abyss of despair? The conflict of survival loomed, thick and heavy. All eyes were on the emerging shadow, and uncertainty gripped the cliffside audience. Could they save the whale, or had they drawn something sinister from the depths? As the fin vanished beneath the surface, tension wrapped around the air like a vice. The confrontation was ignited. What lay beneath was about to make itself known. A sudden silence enveloped the scene, as if the world held its breath. The ocean seemed to calm, but only for a moment. Then, like the prelude to an orchestra, a low, menacing growl rumbled from below, sending a shiver down the spines of the rescuers. The young woman felt her heartbeat thunder in her ears, drowning out the noise of the crowd. What is that?" she stammered, scanning the water's surface, her eyes wild with fear. The shadows beneath grew darker, swirling like ink dissolving in water. Panic gripped the young woman, squeezing her chest tight. From the bow of the boat, the man with the harpoon peered into the depths, desperation in his eyes. "We need to hurry." His words died in his throat as a massive shape surged upward, breaking the surface with a force that sent waves crashing against the boat. The crowd gasped collectively as a colossal creature emerged, easily twice the size of the whale. Its skin was scarred and jagged, covered in what looked like barnacles and remnants of other creatures. Jagged teeth glistened in the sun, and eyes full of ancient malice locked onto the rescuers, assessing their fears. "It's a leviathan," someone whispered, horror coloring their voice. The crowd, once filled with chants of hope, was now gripped by terror, their cheers fading into frantic murmurs. With a bone-chilling roar, the leviathan lunged towards the whale. The young woman's heart dropped. "No. We have to stop it." Panic surged through her as she realized they were facing a predator unlike anything they could have imagined. "Throw the harpoon!" another rescuer shouted, breaking the spell. In that moment, the heavy projectile felt both like salvation and a death sentence. Would it anger the beast? "Do it!" Her voice cracked with fear and determination. The man with the harpoon nodded, and with a fierce thrust, he launched it into the water. The projectile disappeared below the surface with a splash, a fleeting prayer of rescue. The young woman leaned over the edge, watching in dread as the Leviathan opened its massive jaws, sending a spray of salt water into the air. Time slowed. Every breath felt like a countdown to the inevitable. Would it swallow the whale whole? Suddenly, the harpoon pierced the Leviathan's flesh, and a roar of pain echoed across the water. Blood mingled with the salt, painting the ocean a dark crimson as the beast thrashed violently. The young woman felt a surge of hope, they had struck a blow. But then, the Leviathan twisted. The boat rocked perilously, swaying with the unfolding chaos. It snapped its attention towards the rescuers, rage boiling in its depths. The eyes of the beast glinted with hunger and fury. A loud roar unleashed like thunder, shattering the air, and suddenly, a massive wave crashed over the side of the boat, soaking the rescuers. The crowd screamed, falling backward as the wave sent the vessel teetering dangerously. "Hold on!" someone shouted as they struggled to regain balance. The young woman's heart raced, and her breath quickened. They were not just fighting for the whale anymore, they needed to survive. In the swirling chaos, they could see the whale, its body weakening as it thrashed under the onslaught of the relentless parasites. Time was running out. The perilous grips of survival threatened to close in around them. "What do we do now?" she cried out, unsure of how to fight a creature born from the shadows of myth. But before anyone could answer, the Leviathan surged forward with terrifying speed, hunger radiating from its every movement. Just as it lunged, the terrible shadow of the beast loomed over them, its jaws wide open, ready to bite down on anything in its path. Would the rescuers become the next victims of the depths, or could they turn the tide before it was too late? The storm was just beginning to brew. The young woman clutched the side of the boat, her knuckles white as panic surged. The Leviathan hovered just beneath the surface, a dark shadow of predatory intent. She could almost feel its malevolent eyes boring into her soul. Her breaths came quicker now, mixing with the salty air as she swallowed hard, trying to stave off dread. "Is there any way we can distract it?" she shouted over the rising chaos, her mind racing to find a solution. The roar of the Leviathan echoed around them, like a death knell, drowning out the pragmatic voices of the crew. "Maybe if we make noise. Get its attention." A man shouted back, his face pale, moments passed agonizingly slow. The Leviathan was circling, studying its prey, the boat with its desperate rescuers, as if to assess how they could be crushed. The crew fumbled for anything they could use to create sound. One adventurous soul grabbed a metal rod and began banging it against the side of the boat, the clang echoing into the ether. "Hey! Over here!" he yelled, his voice cracking with fear and urgency. Another joined, shouting and banging. Sounds collided, the strikes of metal battling against the monstrous growl of the beast. The Leviathan turned ever so slightly, its jaws still wide and glistening, poised like a guillotine. For a brief, hopeful moment, the distraction seemed to work. What now? The question hung in the air thick with dread. The whale, visible beneath the waves, let out a pained bellow, laced with desperation. Her heart sank. Time was slipping away, and still, the Leviathan had not fully turned its focus. A surge of determination rushed through her. "We have to do something more. We can't just stand here. We can't lose it." She gripped the harpoon tightly, its weight a heavy reminder of their only weapon against this terror. Suddenly, the Leviathan paused mid-lunge, its massive body shifting, its attention seemingly captivated. The crew took a collective breath at this flicker of hope. Could they actually have garnered its interest? But the moment held only fleeting hope. Without warning, the Leviathan crashed toward the boat, finned limbs propelling it through the water with furious speed. A wall of seawater rose, rippling with the beast's wrath, cascading toward them in a terrifying wave. "Brace yourselves." The captain's voice rung clear above the chaos. The crew scrambled, eyes wide with terror, as they prepared for impact. The Leviathan's roar resounded like thunder, a soul-chilling warning. The wave hit with a force unlike anything they had experienced before. Saltwater blinded them, soaked into their clothes, and swirled with the metallic taste of fear. From within the deluge, they could see the Leviathan's maw approaching fast. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, the young woman's eyes caught something glimmering in the water beside the Leviathan. An object. Was it the whale's blood, or something else? Whatever it was drawing the Leviathan in a different direction. Look! She pointed through the spray, her voice cutting through the chaos. They're over there. The water is different. The others turned, shades of confusion skirting their fear. The Leviathan, in its violent fury, seemed torn between its meal and the new scent. The hopeful distraction was morphing into a new strategy. Could they lead the beast away from the whale? Could they navigate this nightmare and find a way to save both lives at once? Let us try it. We can turn it away. She cried, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate sense of purpose. They needed to act now, before the moment slipped away again. As they drew nearer to the object shimmering beneath the roiling waves, her heart thudded loudly against her chest, a mix of fear and possibility. The pressure of survival loomed large, and just ahead, the Leviathan's gigantic frame twisted, its attention wavering again. But darkness hid more beneath the depths, and what lay ahead could change everything. What awaited them beneath the waves was the true terror of this adventure. Would their actions unravel the horror below, or would they provoke something far worse? The tension in the air thickened as they approached the glimmer beneath the waves. It pulsed like a heartbeat, a throbbing allure that seemed almost alive. She felt a jolt of adrenaline as their craft rocked violently in the swells. The Leviathan's titanic form loomed just beneath, a shadow of indescribable menace, but her focus was on the shimmering object, whatever it was. Quick! Focus on the noise! She shouted, hoping to keep the crew grounded as fear threatened to consume them. Metal clanged against metal again, the frantic symphony of their desperation a haunting backdrop to the chaos. Each strike felt shaky, filled with uncertainty, yet their instincts pushed them to act, to fight against the primal dread clawing at their insides. As they drew closer, shadows beneath the surface began to emerge, dozens of elongated forms, writhing in sinuous patterns. They moved like tendrils, unsettling, unseen parasites swarming the Leviathan, their reflexes surfacing with malevolent precision. Suddenly, the seemingly reliable distraction transformed into a nightmare. What are those? One crew member gasped, eyes wide. The clarity of realization painted their faces with horror. The Leviathan loomed like a titan caught in a tempest of its own misfortune, suffering beneath the assault of this unseen army. We have to get that whale! She yelled, cutting through the crew's shock. It's being attacked. We can't let it drown. The Leviathan writhed violently, its movements almost frenzied. The glimmering object was just a few arms lengths away now, but the chaotic dance of parasites began to spiral out of control, the water roiling with frenzied meals. With every struggling thrash, the Leviathan gave a wrenching bellow, sending rippling waves of sound crashing through the air, and then disaster struck. The boat lurched alarmingly to the side. A horrifying gurgle echoed as one crew member lost his grip, plummeting into the chaotic depths, swallowed by the fury and darkness. Gasps erupted from the others as they grasped what had just happened. Get a rope! Help him! She shouted, panic stinging her every word. But the chaotic waves of the Leviathan's torment tossed them back, the air thick with impending despair. The fear on their faces was palpable, each crew member grappling with the weight of reality. The dangers were closing in fast. Where they expected a rescue, they had uncovered a hellish battlefield instead. And the noise! The screeches of the Leviathan muddled with the eerie sounds of the parasites, each layer of fear sharper than the last. She turned to the captain, resolute. We can't abandon him. We need to act. Her heart raced as icy resolve coursed through her veins, pushing aside the overwhelming fear. This might not be what it seems, he muttered, his face taut. She could see him wrestling with disbelief, but the answer was clear. They had to reach out before it was too late. They had to dive into the madness that awaited below, and she could feel dread tightening around her like a vice. Follow me! She shouted, her voice unwavering, as she prepared to leap into the fray. Uncertainty gripped her, but the taste of hope hung faintly in the air. If they succeeded, they could save themselves and the Leviathan. With a reckless urge, she and a couple of others lunged over the side, plunging into the churning abyss below. The water enveloped her, cold and shocking. As the chaotic world erupted around her, eyes scanned desperately. There had to be a way through this nightmare. As her heart raced and her lungs burned for air, she noticed something more alarming than before, an outline deeper than the writhing parasites and the Leviathan itself, something frighteningly larger lurking just beneath, but what it was, she couldn't yet fathom. Would there be a way back to the surface, or had they just unwittingly signed their death warrants? Could their desperate plunge save them from becoming part of the Leviathan's tragic story, or was it the beginning of their darkest nightmare yet? The chill of the water was stinging, numbing her senses as the darkness enveloped. She kicked her legs furiously, fighting to steady herself against the violent swells threatening to drag her down. Eyes wide, she scanned the chaotic depths, and the rippling shadows sent shivers down her spine. Any moment could bring an unseen nightmare crashing into her very existence. "Mark! Where are you?" she screamed, her voice bubbling up in the water. But the answer only echoed back like a haunting lament, lost in the roiling madness. Panic crept deeper, settling in her chest like a stone. She focused on the vibrations around her. Something was thrashing near the surface. She barely had time to think about the menacing tendrils that slithered around the Leviathan when she felt something brush against her leg. It was quick, slippery. It had to be one of those parasites. The shock of it knocked the air from her lungs. "Stay cool, stay focused," she murmured to herself, but the terror clawed at her resolve. She gritted her teeth and pushed deeper, toward the source of the chaos. The iridescent glimmer was just within reach now. Her mind raced as she recalled the life preserver they had thrown to Mark moments before they plunged in. "Get it together," she urged herself, forcing her limbs to move. Each stroke was heavy, the water swirling around her like a whirlpool determined to swallow her whole. The Leviathan's anguished wails were more intense now, a chilling reminder of the life hanging in the balance. Then, a scream pierced through the water, a jarring sound that snatched her breath away. Her heart raced as she spotted Mark, struggling amidst the writhing mass of parasites. He flailed wildly, panic coursing through his movements. "Mark!" she shouted again, fighting against the current as she reached for him, her fingers just grazing his shoulder. The sight of his wide, terrified eyes ignited a spark in her chest. He was still there, still fighting. But in that moment, his courage shattered her resolve. His mouth opened as if to scream again, but a sleek, dark tendril lashed out, wrapping around his legs like a vice. "No!" Her voice echoed in her mind, fierce and determined. She lunged toward him, her instincts overriding the fear pooling inside. With savage determination, she gripped Mark's arm, pulling him with a force that defied the water's grip. But as she yanked him closer, a massive shadow shifted beneath them, larger than anything she could have imagined. The Leviathan, once a behemoth of grace, now appeared to be something altogether sinister in its distress, convulsing against the underwater storm. And accompanying it, that greater darkness shifted ominously, too massive to wrap her mind around. "Swim! Now!" she yelled. The urgency flooded through her veins, and with every ounce of strength, she kicked her legs with a desperate energy that felt almost unnatural. They broke the surface, gasping, swallowing air like it was a lifeline. But their relief was short-lived. There, mirrored in the Leviathan's frantic thrashing, the monstrous form slowly crested the water's surface, scales glistening wickedly, teeth like ancient daggers glinting in the feeble light. "What the hell is that?" Mark wheezed, horror painting his expression, and then it charged a headlong dive toward them, its intent unreadable and monstrous. The dread wrapped around her heart again, a tighter grip than before. In that instant of realization, one thought burned through her mind: had they just exchanged one monster for another? As the looming figure approached with ravenous aggression, she could only wonder, had they truly come to save the Leviathan, or were they ensnared in a web of nightmares beyond comprehension? The water was alive with chaos. She could feel the pressure building from below, pulling at her deeper into the darkness as panic swelled like a wave in her chest. Mark grasped her wrist, his eyes a mixture of fear and desperation that fueled her fight. They were tangled in a nightmare, a swirling sea of terror threatening everything they knew. Swim. Move, she shouted, feeling the warmth of his grip against her skin, a fragile lifeline amidst the crashing reality. They had to escape, or they'd be consumed. The monstrous figure surged forward, its jaws parting in a horrifying arc that seemed to stretch across eternity. The Leviathan's bellowing roars echoed in the depths, sending vibrations through the water that resonated in her bones. It was as if its heartache was palpable, dragging them along in its wake. But the other creature was relentless. It bore down on them, a primal force wrapped in scales glistening like polished weapons. Her instincts screamed at her to flee. She kicked her legs harder, the movement feeling heavy and wrong with the weight of water clinging to them. A shadow loomed closer, engulfing them in darkness as everything narrowed to a single terrifying moment. Then, with sudden clarity, she knew what that form was capable of. It was more than just a predator, it was false hope, a harbinger of doom. It hunted not just sharks but their very souls, a ferocious beast looking to claim them both for its feast. "Mark. We need to split," she yelled, adrenaline coursing. He looked at her, confusion and fear mingling as his eyes darted from her to the approaching terror. "Are you crazy?" "Trust me," she replied, lunging away with a burst of energy. The water roared around her, pulling back like an angry tide. She felt the current grasp at her legs, but she kept swimming forward, desperate to draw the creature away from Mark. A sharp tug made her glance back. Mark was still there, struggling against the gnashing creature. They were forever tied, yet they could drown together, drifting helplessly in this aquatic abyss. "Go," she screamed, her voice strained. The sight of his terrified face twisted her heart, but it had to be done. If they stayed together, they'd both be its prey. Mark grimaced, his expression a mixture of anguish and defiance. "No. I won't leave you. Just swim. Head for shore." But as he clambered behind her, the monstrous creature lunged forward with an unholy grace. She had no time to hesitate. She dove deeper, swallowing her fear as the dark, frigid water enveloped her. The pressure was overwhelming, an unyielding force. But she pressed on until her lungs burned. She twisted and surfaced again, gasping for air, searching the night for any glimpse of Mark. The Leviathan still echoed its pain, but the monstrous threat no longer loomed. A profound eerie quietness blanketed the water. Something flickered in the moonlight, Mark's silhouette against the dim backdrop. Relief washed over her, but then dread turned her stomach. The creature, more formidable now that she could see it clearly, circled like a shark. A vile intelligence glimmered in its eyes. "Mark, come on," she called, her voice strained but urgent. "It's circling back." But as he began to swim toward her, the creature's agitated motion grew, a vast force ready to strike. Just when they thought they had escaped, she felt the water stir violently. A flash of scales and claws plunged toward Mark, snapping through the surface like a rocket. "No." She lunged, as if she could somehow close the distance. A futile gesture drowned underneath the clashing chaos of teeth and terror. The water exploded in a geyser of confusion. She felt the power of the moment overwhelm her as the beast vanished into the depths, taking Mark with it, the turmoil consuming everything she held dear, and in that split second of horror, sheer dread clung to her heart. Was it too late to save him? Did she have what it took to face this horror alone? The surface loomed, but she recoiled. In that vast, dark ocean, every flicker of light promised answers beyond comprehension, and beyond redemption. She bobbed on the surface, choking on salty water and despair. The hollow silence swallowed everything but the distant echoes of the Leviathan's roar, and Mark's face flashed in her mind. Had he fought back? Had he even managed to hold on for a second longer than she had? The water rolled in restless waves around her, and panic ignited inside like a flare. She couldn't drown, not now, not when he might still be alive. She needed to focus, to push through the fear that threatened to consume her. Spluttering, she kicked her legs hard, urging herself toward the faint glow of the beach. But every kick felt heavier as doubt threatened to pull her underwater. How could she leave Mark behind? What if he was out there, waiting for her to turn back? Just when she thought she might make it to safety, a sudden surge in the water yanked her off course, and she was thrown back under. Heart pounding, she fought against the icy grip of panic. Then she spotted a flash of movement in the dark, unmistakable even amidst the chaos. The monstrous creature broke the surface, its scales glimmering under the moonlight, and in its monstrous maw was something glistening with desperation. Mark. The creature had him. A primal scream tore from her lips, echoing into the abyss. Desperation propelled her out again, swimming fiercely toward the horror unfolding. Silent screams clawed at her throat as she surged forward, oblivious to everything else. Her fingers grazed the water's surface, curling tightly into fists. She quickly assessed the monster. Its eyes were cruel, calculating. A black hole of intention that bored into her soul. It slithered beneath the surface, dragging Mark down into its darkness, a world where hope stretched thin like a thread. "Let him go," she shouted, the words bursting forth without thought. She wasn't sure if her voice even reached him, but fury ignited her lungs. She wasn't giving up. Suddenly, the Leviathan broke through the surface, its massive form blocking her path, a wild beast asserting dominance. She felt its presence like a storm looming overhead. Was it willing to fight off its rival? "Come on," she whispered to the dark waters, hoping for a miracle. A violent rippled recess surged across the scene, and she breathed deeply, allowing the energy to seep into her. With every ounce of will, she swam boldly, using the shimmering surface as her guide, a light in the midst of darkness. The Leviathan roared again, this time at her, the sound resonating in the deepest parts of her fears. She caught glimpses of raging eyes and flaring nostrils, followed by the decisive plunge of the creature toward the depths. Time-warped moments stretched, her heart a drumroll of impending doom. But amid the horror, a pulse of determination surged through her veins. If one of them had to take a stand against the demons of the sea, it would be her. The water parted like curtains, and she dove into the depths, eyes scanning for Mark, seeking that flicker of hope. She remembered each detail, the way he smiled, the warmth of his hands, the moments they shared. She had to fight. The monster had taken him, but she would do everything to take him back. Her fingers brushed the gritty seabed. A jolt of clarity gripped her, and she pushed off with all strength. Her vision was sharp now. She could see it faintly glimmering, the shape of Mark trapped in a tangle of limbs and scales, dark veins reaching for him. Another roar thrashed the water, and a pulse of sheer terror hit her. Would she arrive too late? With one last breath, she surged forward, ready to face whatever darkness awaited her. And just as her fingertips brushed against the surface of the dark creature's utter chaos, everything began to unravel, sending tides crashing around her. Had she found Mark? What horror lurked in their path? The answer lay just ahead, waiting to reveal itself. She swept her hands through the darkness, searching, feeling every inch of the cold, gritty water with growing desperation. The Leviathan's roar echoed in her ears, reverberating against the pounding of her heart. Time felt like a rubber band stretching, pulling her tension tighter with each passing moment. Mark was right there. She could feel him just out of reach, enveloped in the creature's monstrous grip. Panic and rage quailed in her gut, and she refused to let the darkness win. Summoning strength from deep within, she plunged deeper, her lungs burning with every desperate kick. There he was. A glimmer of hope flickered as she caught sight of his face. He was paler than she remembered, his eyes closed, a ghostly figure against the monstrous backdrop. She reached for him, fingers brushing past the nightmare of scales and flesh that encased him. The Leviathan opened its mouth wider, the dread of the unknown sending shockwaves through her. "No. Mark!" she cried, as if he could somehow hear her call through the chaos surrounding them. But the creature twisted, revealing rows of jagged teeth, sharp as razors glimmering in the murky depths. Adrenaline surged through her. She couldn't let fear consume her now. She clenched her jaw, reached out, and pressed her palm against his chest. A jolt of electricity coursed through her fingers, a connection as tender as a whisper but powerful enough to spark life. But the Leviathan surged, jerking her away from him, dragging her back. The pull of the waters was relentless, threatening to claim her just as it had claimed him. She fought against it, clawing through the dark like a warrior determined not to falter. Suddenly, the Leviathan let out a deafening roar, its coils twisting painfully around Mark. It seemed as though the creature felt her defiance, knew she would not back down without a fight. The water grew hot with the monster's fury, boiling around her, and she could taste the salt of her own fear mixing with the sea. Then she remembered. They had trained together, practiced survival tactics and how to escape perilous traps. She allowed instinct to guide her. Kicking hard, she shot up, drawing on every shred of strength she could muster. She needed space, and she needed air. As she broke through the surface, gasping for precious breaths, she turned back, desperate to regroup. The Leviathan's massive tail whipped through the water, a warning shot across the moonlit surface. But that anger made her heart race, igniting her spirit. "Come on! I can't lose you, too!" She screamed, but the waves swallowed her words. Her body quaked with fear. Shaking, she looked around for anything that could help. And then she spotted a long piece of driftwood, buoyant and sturdy. Was it a sign? She reached for it, grabbing hold with determination, claws digging into the rough grain, using it as leverage to propel herself toward the Leviathan. Hold on. The thought of Mark kept her moving. Just hold on. The driftwood felt like a lifeline, a hopeful tether to the world above. She angled it toward the Leviathan as it turned, eyes fixed on her with malicious intent. With a swing, she struck the Leviathan. The impact sent splashes of water flying, and for a moment, she saw the creature pause, bewildered by her audacity. The opening she needed. "Mark!" She cried again, keeping her grip firm on the wood, heart thundering. The battle for his freedom was on. As the creature thrashed, she dove again, aiming for Mark once more. But the situation leaped to chaos. The Leviathan roared, and from its depths, other shapes started to emerge, narrow, slick, and terrifying. Parasites, drawn to the darker reaches of the water, began to swarm. What were these creatures, and how would she fight them off? The haunting shadow of despair loomed closer, leaving her to question if she could really save Mark. And as she faced this new horror, the murky waters churned with new threats, leaving her life's purpose hanging by a thread. What dark salvation awaited her in the depths? The chaos of the ocean whirled around her like a storm, pulling her back toward despair. The Leviathan loomed, its massive presence a monument to dread, but she could not back down. Not now. Not when Mark's life hung in the balance. She felt rage coursing through her veins, a tenacious spark igniting against the fear swimming within her. With every ounce of resolve she could muster, she lunged back toward the Leviathan, the driftwood gripped tightly in her hand. The monstrous creature twisted in response, its furious roars echoing through the depths like a warning bell. She raised the makeshift weapon, letting the vibrant adrenaline fuel her next move. The shift in the water was instant. Something deeper lurked beyond. "Get away from him!" she screamed, lunging again. The impact of the wood against the Leviathan's scaled skin sent ripples through both the beast and the water, each strike activating a hidden strength within her. She could hear the echo of shock in the water around her. Had she truly caught its attention? But there was no time to dwell on that thought. The unmistakable swarm of parasites began to circle in, their movements a grotesque choreography, predatory and relentless. At that moment, she felt the weight of unimaginable despair press down on her chest. "Mark!" She hollered again, praying he could hear her beneath the weight of the chaos. With fierce determination, she dove into the dark waters, striking through the thrashing mass of parasites. The struggle of the Leviathan against her was nothing compared to the urgency spiraling within her. Each movement felt like a frozen dance between salvation and annihilation. Through the twists and turns, she finally saw him, Mark's silhouette, fighting against the relentless grip of the creatures. Dread rushed in, wrapping around her heart like ivy, and she felt the privacy of terror envelop her. But there was no time for fear. She surged forward with the driftwood, creating a barrier against the slithering shadows. Just as she reached him, the Leviathan flicked its massive head, the broad shadow sending waves crashing against her. Time froze. No. Every ounce of ferocity exploded in her chest, fueling a sense of urgency she had lacked before. She grasped Mark's shoulder, pulling him toward her, struggling through the onslaught of frenzied creatures that threatened to tear them apart. "Swim!" she yelled, urgency cracking through. Mark's eyes opened, filled with pain and a dawning fear that mixed with determination. He nodded, launching into action as they both turned toward the surface, but the parasites had formed a wall of sinewy malice, writhing through the chaos, determined not to let them pass. Each tendril ranged and attacked, slithering around their legs. Her heart raced, a pitiful drum echoing in her mind with every pull and shove. "Fight!" she gasped, words strangled by the cold biting at her lungs. They kicked and kicked, pushing through, blinded by the swirling chaos of the water. Would they ever breach the surface again? The Leviathan roared again, its agony echoing throughout the depths as they swam forward. An opening. Desperate, she seized the moment and broke free into the intoxicating rush of the ocean above. They breached the surface, gulping in sweet, precious air. Each gasp felt like freedom, a flicker of hope igniting amidst the turmoil. She looked at Mark, relief and horror swimming in his eyes. But the Leviathan wasn't done. It surfaced behind them with a furious growl, the sight sending terror back through her veins. "We need to go. Now." The darkness of the depths would not relinquish its grip easily. With renewed energy, they kicked toward the shoreline, everything else fading into the background. The tide fought against them, but each surge of water brought them closer to safety. The flickering lights on the beach shone like beacons, calling them home, yet, as relief began to seep in, she felt a rumble beneath her. Something was rising. She turned, fear swirling in her stomach as they both saw the Leviathan charging toward them with furious intent. Panic rippled through her. They were almost safe, but if that monstrous beast caught up, it would all be for nothing. "Faster!" she screamed, and they pushed harder against the waves, adrenaline pooling in their legs. Hope battled despair, driving them forward as the shores of safety came into view. Just as they reached the shallow waters, she felt the Leviathan's vast shadow loom again. A primal roar shattered the air, echoing through her bones, but they ran, sprinting onto the sand, the creature below thrashing helplessly in the retreating tide. It could not follow them to the shore. The moment they reached the safety of land, Mark collapsed to his knees, gasping. She dropped beside him, wild-eyed and panting, heart racing from the adrenaline and the weight of everything they had faced. Together, they looked back at the ocean, watching the Leviathan struggle against the oncoming waves, driven by instincts neither could comprehend. "We did it," Mark whispered, disbelieving. But deep inside, they both knew the battle wouldn't be over. Nature was chaotic, thriving on this darkness and light, and the world would never truly be free from its horrors. Yet for this moment, they had lived, fought, and emerged as survivors, and sometimes, that was enough. They turned away from the ocean, leaving behind their fears, and stepped into a new day, ready to face whatever came next. Do you feel that rush from the adventure? Now, this is the moment to subscribe immediately to the channel. You need to make sure you don't miss the next exclusive stories that are coming your way. If you loved this conclusion, smash that like button now to help the algorithm reach others who want this thrill. And don't forget to flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about what happens next, because your voice matters. Finally, don't wait even one more second to share this adventure with at least 5 friends who would love to dive into this wild journey. Your support makes all the difference.